Dr. Angela Patterson is a media psychologist, writer, and communicator who currently serves as the head of content at Springtide Research Institute. Angela also teaches organizational behavior and culture in the master's program for organizational development and leadership at Fielding Graduate University. Angela earned a doctorate in media psychology from Fielding, where she studied how media and technology affect cultural institutions. Specifically, her research focused on how digital media affect the religious and spiritual development of adolescents and young adults. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Angela Patterson.
Good morning. Oh, goodness. Okay, here we go. That's a hard act to follow, Father Joshua. I was not prepared, but amused as a Texan and a Southern girl. Thank you. So I am Dr. Angela Patterson, and I am here from Springtide Research Institute. We are actually geographically dispersed, so I can't even say we're located anywhere. I myself am located in Dallas, Texas, and we study the religious and spiritual lives of young people ages 13 to 25. So today I want to walk you through some of our research on what young people have told us over our brief 5 years of existence and what we've learned about how they're navigating their lives and how religion and spirituality fit into that. So we're going to go fast because I want us to have some time to have question and answer. So please do, if things come up for you, then just jot them down and hopefully we can get to them in Q&A. But here's what we're going to hit today. We're going to talk a little bit about the Gen Z profile, and then we're going to talk about what we have come to learn about Gen Z's religious and spiritual lives. And then we're going to talk about Gen Z and sacred moments, and I'll explain what that is when we get there. And then we're going to end with just a little bit on Gen Alpha, because as of 2024, the oldest of that newest generation turned 13. And so we did a very brief study on them, so we will end by talking about the youngest. Okay, so there's a couple of things I want to point out about Gen Z in general that I think are important to help set the stage for what we're going to dive into when it comes to their religion and spirituality. So there's just a couple of cohort-style things that I want you to understand about them. And most of this will be of no surprise to you because you work mainly with kids who are of this cohort. So this is from Brookings, and it shows the change in the U.S. population from the latest, well, it was not the latest census, it's 2010 to 2020. So you see that the growth in this country, you see how white has actually receded, and the change in the U.S. population comes mainly from those who are Latino or Hispanic and those who are two or more races. So the country overall is getting browner. And we knew that. That has been a trend that has been going for some time. I do think, though, that this was the first census where we showed a decline in the growth of what we would consider the white population. When we look at under age 18, you see how much the population has changed. Now there's many more people under 18 that are two or more races, Latino or Hispanic and Asian American. And there's been a significant decline of those who identify as white. So we definitely have a shift happening, and most of the young people, that population change that we've seen in the U.S. is due to there being more babies of color and young people of color. This is just a different way of looking at the same breakdown over time from 1990 to 2000 to 2010 to 2020. So you see how these racial breakdowns are shifting fairly quickly when you think about it in terms of population change. So this is an extremely diverse generation, and based on these population trends, that will probably continue into Gen Alpha. We'll probably continue to see that same pattern unless something drastic happens. They are shaped by a hybrid existence. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say that most of you know how much these young people are on devices. I don't think that's revelatory in any stretch. But I think there is something important to note that unlike most of us in this room, me included, they are not living offline and online like many of us. Many of us still kind of have that demarcation in our heads sometimes. These young people do not, because they've always had the level of technology and the number of devices as part of their formative years. And so this is their life, so to speak, whereas it came to be a part of ours later in our cycles. So that's definitely a difference, and it informs how they see the world and what they expect from the world, from people, from relationships. It definitely colors all of it. And then in our work specifically, we found this recurring theme about authenticity. They really kind of zero in on people, places, things, and spaces where they can be themselves and where others can be themselves. So when we did a study that we conducted this back in 2020 as far as when we collected the data, but we saw that 55% of the respondents that we talked to thought that it was important to be their authentic selves when participating in an organization. Nearly 40% of young people say it was important, that they'll only join an organization if it values inclusion among its highest priorities. Over 60% of the young people we talked to said that people should be treated equally no matter what. And 72% said they want to join organizations where everyone is safe, welcome, and has equal access to resources. And we'll see later in our work on religion and spirituality that if these dynamics are not present in ways that they feel comfortable with, that's usually when they exit. But we'll get to that. Okay, so Gen Z religious and spiritual lives. Here's what we have come to understand. I want to start here because this is the question we get the most. It's usually something to do with them going to church in some form or fashion. And so you see the blue colors. Those usually, this is actually smaller than it was over our previous years in terms of never only being 25%. Usually it hovers somewhere in the 30s. So that was kind of an interesting shift. We can't say it's a definitive one because we need more data to make that sort of claim, but it was interesting to see this breakdown. But nonetheless, you see that there's still almost half that are never or rarely. And then the rest of the spectrum covers some sort of intermittent attendance, with only 16% at once a week. But just because they may not be in traditional places of worship doesn't mean they're not interested and they don't care and they have distinct thoughts about it, because they absolutely do. Yeah, I thought I skipped one. So this is our chart for religious and spiritual identity. This is a question we ask every year to understand how they self-identify when it comes to religion and spirituality. And you see the numbers here covering 5 years. They don't change that much. They're all high, and they're pretty much the same. And so this tells us as social science researchers that they claim these identities because they provide value somehow. These numbers probably wouldn't be as high if they didn't ascertain some value from their religion and spiritual lives. So we find that to be encouraging, especially from a well-being perspective, because we know that religious and spiritual lives, right, whether that's identity, practice, community, or belief, tends to correlate well with flourishing. So when we think about belief, this is what we get. You see, 42% say, I know it exists and I have no doubt about it, which is pretty strong. And then you still have 30%, I believe more than I doubt. So there's already some strong belief patterns happening. And we've asked this question also for 5 years now, and it tends to be about the same. So this is holding steady shows, again, that also that belief has value to them somehow. And our interviews often get into exactly how that does derive value. So to what extent do you feel connected to the following? It's not just a higher power. When we asked about all of humanity and nature, you see that there's also a lot of connections here. So when we think about belief and especially in a higher power and kind of a more linear, more traditional concept of what it means to believe and to be, especially in a Christian space, it's not limited for them. They're also thinking about what it means to be connected this way to all of humanity and to nature. I can't tell you how many times nature comes up in our interviews. We don't even have to be talking about religion and spirituality, and somehow it will circle back to this. Being in nature and having those connections in various types of nature is really big for this generation and for the people that we talk to. So when we did ask them about practice, here's what we get. And this has also shown kind of the same sort of trajectory year over year. Art is always a big one. And when we think about art, we're talking about that's music, that's literal art, anything of an artistic lean is included in that category. So art is a huge one that they consider religious or spiritual practice, either daily or weekly. That's what these numbers show. Again, being in nature pops up as a popular one. Reading, writing, and prayer is still in there. Prayer's still big, especially considering that we actually ask about 12 or 13 different things. You're looking at the top 5. So, and then many young people feel that spirituality and religion are actually connected. They're not separate or opposite, which is kind of an interesting dynamic. And that there's parts of religion and spiritualities that they agree with, right? So again, this isn't a linear thing. This isn't, I'm going to stay in this box and that's where I live. Now, obviously, there's young people that are like that, absolutely. But when we think about them overall, more characteristically, they tend to be a little bit more curious and exploratory when it comes to their religion and spirituality. So they are ready to lean into learning about other faith traditions, other types of spirituality and religion, and see what might be there for them. We have found that, as I have previously noted, that religion and spirituality is more of a winding path for them. And when we talk about winding path, we're really talking about 4 things, and I'll touch on each of these. When it comes to curiosity, they are looking at different parts of various religious traditions, spiritualities, all aspects of religion and spirituality, usually in order to figure out the answers to life's big questions. What does all this mean? How does this help me? How does this help the people around me? How does this help my world? That's what they're seeking when they're curious. When we think about flexibility, they are willing to try on the practices and rituals of many traditions in order to see what might work for them in various ways. Yes, it could go back to having some questions answered, but usually it goes back to things about well-being and connection and having comfort and solace and those sorts of things. So they're willing to do that. They're not locked in any one lane, so to speak, for mostly. And then with connection, young people in this age group are seeking out spaces where they can have meaningful relationships. And if they don't feel a lot of connection in these spaces, they tend not to be there for very long. So having the ability to form connections, even, like I'll go in if there's just a chance that I might make a friend or be connected to a trusted adult or those sorts of things. I'm in, I will try it. That's usually what draws people in, but it is also one of the things that will make them exit. And that leads me into wholeness, because remember how we talked about inclusion and authenticity? This is one of the things that comes up a lot in terms of wholeness. I want to be my full self, but that's not enough. You also need to be able your full self, and he needs to be himself, and they need to be their selves. You know, everybody needs a place, and everybody needs to be welcome at the table, so to speak. And when that doesn't occur, when I can't be my full self and they can't be their full selves, then maybe this isn't the place for me. And so that's when we start to see the disconnection. But when those meaningful relationships are present, sometimes even if we're not aligned in dogma and theology and all of those things, if those meaningful relationships are present, then they'll stick around. So it's just a different way of approaching spirituality, unlike some of previous generations where we were usually born into normally a Christian tradition of sorts, if you're from the U.S., and you just kind of either stick with it or you leave it behind at some point. This is not nearly as linear for this generation. So when we think about meaningful relationships, it's important to talk for a minute about why this might be more important to this particular cohort than past cohorts. Because we know in education especially K through 12, meaningful relationships and people feeling safe, I mean, that's half the battle. That's not going to change, generation by generation. But we also understand that this generation does not have the same, they live in a society that doesn't have the same levels of authority that previous generations did. We believed what the media said. We believed that our government was taking care of us, right? There were these kinds of kind of nodes of authority, if you will. A lot of that has been eroded in the last 40, 50 years. And so the places where they find authority and trust is generally in more one-on-one relationship versus I'm going to place my trust in this authority, right, in this social institution. When we asked, and I don't have this graph in here, but I think it was maybe 2019 that we asked about what their trust in institutions were and named out, the regular ones, government, media, religion, I think we even had nonprofits in there. And nonprofit was the highest one at 5. Like if it was a 1 out of 10 scale, they trusted nonprofits the most, and it was only a 5. So that's why the meaningful relationships are so key. Because if I'm not really tethered to any big thing out here, then I need to feel tethered to something more local, so to speak, right? And so that's where there's a great opportunity for adults to engage in what we term as relational authority, which is listening, transparency, integrity, care, and expertise. When we asked young people, well, what makes you feel connected to a trusted adult? What makes you even want to be in a relationship like that? These are the things that most frequently came up. And you'll see, when it comes to building trust, all of these numbers are really high, right, for both 13 to 17 and 18 to 25-year-olds. And that just goes to show, if you use any of these, you're already ahead of the game. If you're using more than one, great. You don't necessarily need to hit all 5 because all 5 of these matter individually and collectively. And I want to hone in on 2. One is care, because in our interviews with young people, care comes up a lot. I want to know that someone cares about me. And there's lots of ways you can demonstrate care. There's probably appropriate ways in your own context, so I won't spell that out for you. But what they did tell us was, I want to be cared for. And 83% say, I'm more likely to take advice from somebody if I know they care. 79%, I'm more likely to listen to those adults if they know that they care for them. So this can start to make a difference in how you're actually able to guide them, which is incredibly important. And then the other thing is listening. And I know y'all are experts at listening, so I will not belabor this. But I think it's important to double down on what we would consider active listening, coming into conversation without judgment. That comes up a lot with young people. I'm afraid they're judging me. They are judging me. They're looking down on me. They are dismissing me, all of those sorts of things. They want somebody who's actively listening and engaging with them in a way that makes them feel supported. So even all of these numbers are high, so I won't read them off, but remembering things that they've shared. Somebody who actually takes the time to really hear what they have to say, who can show that they've understanding what they've been through, even though the young people we've talked to said, we know that adults don't fully know what we're going through, and that's okay. But if they can show some empathy, that would go a long way. And again, if they show that you care about them, they're more likely to trust. So this graph was really interesting to us when we did this in 2019. So this is even pre-pandemic. When we asked young people about them feeling alone, feeling misunderstood, feeling left out, feeling stressed and overwhelmed, we got a certain set of numbers. When we crossed that with how many trusted adults they reported having in their lives, you see the impact here. So if a young person said, I have 0 trusted adults, we saw rates of feeling alone around 66%. If that young person had 5 or more trusted adults, those young people said 9%. So it's a drastic change. The more trusted adults a young person has, the less likely they are to struggle with some of these negative mental health outcomes and some of these negative emotional outcomes. So your presence matters deeply for not only flourishing, right, but also to help stave off some of the negative that we might be seeing in our classrooms and schools. So I'm going to pivot. That's what I have on religion and spirituality in general. But remember, we talked about diversity. And so we can't really talk about Gen Z without talking about how what we consider BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color, that group of young people are deeply and often negatively impacted by racial injustice, and how that intersects with their faith. We did a very small study, I think in 2022, where we talked specifically to BIPOC young people about this and used some of our larger data set and carved out the BIPOC respondents and looked at some of their responses. And this is what we learned from that. I think it's important from a social science perspective just to note what we're talking about when we talk about social identity, because it is more than just about race per se or an ethnicity. We are thinking about the part of the person's understanding of self that comes from their membership in social groups or categories. So that can be many things, right? And often, for most of us, there's overlapping identities that truly shape our full social identity, usually race and gender being 2 of the main ones. But like it says, there's social identities are developed by a wide range of factors, especially parental and peer socialization. That's a huge one. But we also come to understand our social identity through experiences of inclusion and exclusion, especially before 18. And cultural messages about the bounds of belonging within and between certain groups. So I learned very early as a person of color about in-groups and out-groups through various experiences that I have. And from the BIPOC people that we've talked to, that definitely shows up in their experience of life in general, and even in their faith. So, for example, May, who is Black, when we asked her, how has your ethnic racial identity shaped your faith? She said, I am the person who can't leave race outside of a space. Being Black shapes the way I think about things in a lot of ways and what I tend to think about. Religious or spiritual places are no exception. Darian, who identified as Asian and white, says, my faith community has shaped how I think about my racial identity. I think, what does the Lord want me to do on this earth? Then I think about how I'm born as half of European ancestry and half of Asian ancestry. So right away, I'm like, okay, this is a characteristic of me that is less common among people on the earth right now. And so I kind of think on that and I pray on that. I'm like, all right, Lord, what could this mean for me? And I'm graced with so many moments where I'm able to read a situation or communicate a situation that somebody else just might not have the background for, the knowledge for. I see those opportunities as ways that God has really put me here at this time for some purpose. My mixed ethnicity has really been a kind of guiding light for that service. And we think back to those slides with the Brookings data from the 2020 census, we have more kids than ever that identify as two or more races. So this could be, right, could be, not for every biracial person, but it could be the reality for a lot of mixed race people. I put this in here twice on purpose, so I would remember to tell you this. So we also asked of May the question in reverse. How has your faith shaped your racial ethnic identity? She didn't understand the question. She was like, what do you mean by that? And we're like, well, how does your faith impact how you see your race? And she's like, it doesn't. It only worked for most people, I'll say, especially the black young people that we talked to. It tended to only be in one direction. I'm black first before I'm anything else. And so not that that's going to apply to every black student you have, but I think it's important to point that out, that while ethnicity shapes and race shapes a lot of worldview, faith doesn't necessarily have the same impact in all spaces. So I know that the slide says for faith leaders, but this can absolutely apply to any trusted adult. These are 3 things that we just kind of pulled out from our interview data that seem to come up again and again. And these are more practical steps when you're working with BIPOC young people, just to remember, right? Zion said, faith leaders need to approach the situations with the knowledge that they can't really understand what it's like. I think to a great degree they can understand some things about being a black young person, say like fear of police, discrimination in the workplace and in schools. They can understand that to some degree. But I feel that there's other things compounded, especially with social media, coming of age in the pandemic, turning 18 during the pandemic. All of these things have changed the entire world going forward. So even if you are a person of color, it's important for you to understand that you are still not a young person in this time and space. And so your experience is still very different. The ways that you can identify with them, great. If not, it makes total space for empathy. And that's why it's important to really take any mental health concerns seriously, because we talk to young people for this project and others that have told us that there's been people in their lives who didn't really take their mental health concerns seriously, which is alarming to hear, but we hear it often. Lana said, I don't want a Christian therapist. One Christian therapist told me, God doesn't give you more than you can handle, or God is testing you. I'm like, oh, what's the rubric? What's the assignment? You can't test someone without telling them what they're being tested on. You know, those little bumper sticker Christianity evangelical things that really, really first drew me away, and it's only been recently that I'm like, oh, not everyone is that one therapist. It took her a while, but she came around. But it's these sorts of things that, while well-intentioned, can land very badly. And so it's important to really hear what they have to say about how their mental health is being impacted by various things. And then welcoming and embracing the ethnic racial identity of young BIPOC. And this could be easier said than done in certain environments. Isabella said that in her faith community, it brought her a lot of confidence and less anxiety regarding who she was and where she came from. She says, so they influenced me in a positive way by honoring my culture, my identity. Understanding my identity just takes all the pressure off. I was more proud to be Latino. I didn't feel inferior. So yeah, I just love who I am and I love where I come from. My faith community has given me the confidence that I belong in this community and with Christ. So they absolutely can intersect. And when a young person's racial and ethnic identity is not only just welcomed, but celebrated and embraced, that's when there can be real connections for all aspects of their lives. Okay, speaking of connections with faith, let's dive into sacred moments. So we did a study because we noticed over our short time of existence that we saw more and more young people saying they didn't come from any sort of religious or spiritual background. I think it's probably still up in the 30s, percentage-wise, of young people who just don't have any mooring of that sort. And so we started to wonder, and most of us have a Christian background, and we try really hard not to let that influence our work, but we did wonder, okay, well then, how do they know what's sacred? That's a very Christian thing. It's a very faith-based kind of notion to think about something as sacred. It's very much established in our cultural milieu, especially in the U.S., I mean, kind of used as a term, but when it comes to faith, do they really have an idea of what that is? And so we took a definition from the Psychology of Religion that's in the blue bar, and then we expanded it out a little bit so we could capture this idea of what might be considered sacred for people who don't have religious language and don't have a religious background. So what's on the white side of the screen, that is how we described the sacred, what might be sacred to people. So rather than even using the word, we didn't. We just used this definition. And then in turn, this is what we learned from our interviews and from our surveys. Sacred moments are personal, relational, and extraordinary. And if you're a person of faith yourself, then you might recognize some of these dynamics and what they're describing. But for young people, sacred moments are personal, meaning they feel tailor-made, and that they're usually communicating deep truths that are specific to the person experiencing them. They're relational, meaning that they are marked by profound feelings of interconnectedness. I would say 80% of the things that we heard about that were sacred involved other people, usually family. So something to think about. And then sacred moments are extraordinary, meaning that they're set apart from the ordinary life in meaningful ways. So it doesn't have to be some big giant thing. It could be actually very small, but it somehow to that person is set apart from the ordinary and everyday kind of mundane life. And so when we think about each of these, I've added some quotes from our interviews just to kind of illustrate what we're talking about when we say personal, relational, extraordinary. What did you experience during this moment? They are experiencing inspiration, gratitude, humility, curiosity, feeling blessed. You see how high all those numbers are. So a lot of the young people we talked to were like experiencing a mix of these things. It wasn't usually just, I was inspired, I was grateful. They're usually feeling these feelings in some sort of combination. And then Emma said, a sacred moment that I had was going to college, because not everybody gets the opportunity to go to college, and not everybody graduates in 4 years, which I'm on track to do. So I think getting into college was a sacred moment for me. It also marked when I would finally get the independence that I wanted. So you see this very kind of normal life transition. For Emma, that was a sacred thing, and that was very personal to her. When we think about relational, here's some of the things they're also experiencing when connecting with others in these moments. I felt connected to something that was really real. I felt intense feelings of loving kindness. I felt that I was in the presence of something larger than myself. I was part of something infinite. I was in the presence of a higher power, all of these sorts of feelings. Elaine said, my mom is one of the best people ever. She's really good at seeing everything deeper, and she always taught us to see things deeper. She always instilled in us a sense of gratitude and discernment. And we heard a lot of kinds of stories about family members like this one. And then extraordinary. You see, peace and serenity, awe. It felt unlike everyday life. It felt that existence was deeply meaningful. All distractions seemed to melt away. This came up a lot in terms of, it's like, whatever was over here just went away, and I'm here with this one thing, whatever this interaction was. And that I felt time had stopped. That seemed to be a real marker for, oh, okay, something big is happening. I might not be able to totally name it, but it's happening. This sacred moment gave me a different outlook because I've been so stressed recently, but then I realized God sees everything we do. So I shouldn't care, but I shouldn't stress as much because God has me and my back. We heard stories like that. I've had this moment, and now I understand this to be true about my existence, my life, my surroundings, the people around me, all of these sorts of things. So they were absolutely having sacred moments. They just might not describe it in the language that faith would describe it, if that makes sense. One thing we did ask, though, was, do you feel that they can be manufactured? And it was overwhelmingly no. These things are way too bespoke to be manufactured or created in any way. And one might argue, I mean, we are looking through this through a social science lens, but if you look through it through a theological lens, there might be some explanation as to why you can't manufacture them. I'll just leave it at that. But we realize that these dynamics from a social science perspective are ones that it's an aligning of all the stars, so to speak. There's a confluence of factors here that create these moments. And so if we can't make them, if we can't program for them, if we can't create clubs and environments where these things flourish, right, then what is ours to do? For adults, it's not about making plans, you know? It's about what we think as shifting perspective. And so we call this sacred sensibility, which is a posture that adults can assume that enables young people to see, appreciate, and respond to the sacred. And what does that mean? It allows, think of ways, and big and small, right? It just might depend on what your resource level is, that young people can feel connection to the divine and to others in new and different ways. The divine and the others is super important in this kind of hierarchy, in this framework. Finding space to reflect on and process new experiences. When we talked to young people, many of them said, I didn't necessarily realize how important and how sacred, I'm using the language, not they didn't, this was until maybe a little bit later, until I had time to really sit with it. And so having space where they can actually do that reflection might generate that outcome for them, maybe. It actually does lead to them having a better understanding of themselves and the world around them, and then allows them to experience the emotions that contribute to overall well-being. Young people told us that with these experiences that they were having that either they deemed sacred in the moment or deemed sacred later, it really did help them to have either a sense of direction, a sense of greater meaning, or a greater sense of peace. So there were definitely upsides from a mental health perspective from these moments. Okay, real quick, we're going to do Gen Alpha and then we'll talk. So we, because the oldest of Gen Alpha entered our data set in 2024, I think that's right, we were like, okay, this is a great time to just see what they're already thinking, feeling, believing, what their perceptions are, all of this sort of thing. So I just pulled a couple of slides that have to do with religion and spirituality. We actually asked them about 5 different categories. I think media and technology, their experience with COVID, identity, several things. But this is free, so you can just download it off our website if you want to see the whole thing. It's short. But I just wanted to point out some things about what 13-year-olds are already saying about their religion and spirituality. And overall, 13-year-olds know most that they're 13. The rest of it is a little murky. You know what I mean? So let's take this lightly. We know that 13-year-olds are going to change. They're going to change their minds big time. But what is interesting that if some of this doesn't change, that's going to be fascinating. So here we go. So again, these are the identity questions we always ask everyone. So we ask the 13-year-olds. You see the breakdown here. It's kind of split. And generally, when we think of developmentally from a faith perspective, most 13-year-olds are still going to claim whatever their parents are claiming at this point. So you'll see, like here, it's overwhelmingly Christian. I mean, they're generally not at an age where they're sussing this out yet. So we were not surprised by that breakdown. And this, again, this is self-report too. So that's how they identified. But what's interesting here is that 13-year-olds, almost half of them, already said that they know that the higher power exists and they have no doubt about it. And so we saw 42% of the 13 to 25 age range agree to the same thing. So this is slightly higher. So it'll be interesting to see if actually this holds. We don't know yet. So we'll obviously continue to keep an eye on that. Also, they see the importance of religion in their lives. 36% saying it's among the most important. So that's also interesting to watch because that's pretty high for this age group. And then when we asked for some of their open-ended comments, you can imagine some of the things they wrote. If you teach 13-year-olds, we were like, oh, okay. But then we picked these for the slide. We had a time looking at those, just to be honest. But I think this represents kind of the spread that we saw. Namely, there was a lot about we need to be more accepting of each other. There was a lot of that kind of sentiment, which we thought was really interesting. And like the one on the right, well, my right-hand side, I think it's a strange time to be alive, which I think a lot of us would agree with. I sometimes worry for the future with how addicted my peers are to the internet. But if we have faith, I think we'll be okay. I know, right? But, I wanted to highlight that because from our work, we are continually inspired by what we see from young people. The kids are going to be all right. I think especially with our guidance, as Father Joshua talked about, the gardener's compassionate gaze, that's what all of this is. And if we are able to really tap into that compassionate gaze and give them what they need when they need it, then they really will be all right. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much.
I'm happy to welcome to our stage three Ignatian educators. Ashley Chapman is the principal of Loyola Academy in St. Louis. Jeff Leping is the vice principal for students at St. Paul's High School in Winnipeg. And Mike Lovinguth is the assistant principal for student services at Arrupe Jesuit High School in Denver. Ashley, Jeff, and Mike will share their lived experience of Dr. Patterson's address. Please join me in welcoming Ashley, Jeff, and Mike.
Thank you, Father Powell, and thank you, Dr. Patterson, for your presentation this morning. My name's Ashley Chapman, and I have the privilege of serving as the principal at Loyola Academy of St. Louis, which is a Jesuit nativity school serving boys only in grades 4 through 8. So all of our in-house students are members of Gen Alpha, and then we are a 13-plus year program. So we have 3 members of our staff that provide graduate support services to our students as they are identifying their best fit high school, matriculating, and then figuring out post-secondary plans. The school was founded in 1999, and we moved into this facility here in the early mid-2000s. This is home. This is our home away from home. We are in school almost 200 school days a year, 10 hours per day. So that's 7:30 to 5:30. So for us as faculty and staff and for our students, we spend more waking hours at 3851 Washington Boulevard than we do in our own homes. And we'll come back to that a little bit. This is a picture of my entire student body earlier this year. There were 78 students enrolled then. There'll be 86 in the fall. Just a few of my faculty are pictured here. As you see, we serve predominantly boys of color in St. Louis City, and our students have incredible potential, and we provide some structure and some services to help them achieve that potential in their time with us, and then to head off and continue to maximize that potential moving forward. 85% of my students' families qualify for the federal free or reduced lunch program, and the other 15% hover right above that line. So our students and our families are living on the margin, and they were there before the dual pandemic, before the grip of TikTok, and for our students, the video game really took hold. And then in St. Louis, we've had an increasing number of sort of crises or natural disasters. The red marks the path of a tornado that ripped through our city on May 16th of this year. The tornado went from the southwest to the northeast. And if you see a purple dot, that's the Contemporary Art Museum. We are right across the street from that at Loyola Academy. So the tornado narrowly missed our campus, but it tore up the residences of a lot of my students. Many of our students live in the Ville or Walnut Park just to the north. And so this kind of leads me to my first thing that we do. We have a deep sense that our students are searching for some relief from some of the psychological stressors that they encounter. And at Loyola, we are able to provide some psychological first aid and a lot of wraparound services so that when students are with us in the building, the brainstem can kind of relax and the frontal lobe can turn on, and students can then do that work of affiliating and belonging and learning. Angela didn't mention this, but I think that there's been a reduction in stigma of mental health services among young people, and so I think it's really important that we capitalize on that reduction and flood our buildings with these wraparound services and mental health supports that our kids are asking for and are willing to take us up on. This is a picture of my faculty and staff from a year ago. Some of them are right here in the room with us. And I mentioned that at Loyola we have long hours and it's a long school year, so it's a different commitment. It's a true vocation. And this is a nod to kind of an old book, but Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, was really formative in my management of adults. We hire for mission. We're really explicit about what it takes. And once you've got the right people on the bus and they're in the right seats on the bus, you can really let them be themselves. Each one of these adults pictured shows up as themselves to work. And we bring our hobbies and our interests, especially when we think that our middle school boys will not find what we're into cool. We find that they do it almost more. What the students see in us is that we form authentic relationships with one another. I think this is an opportunity of scale. We're tiny, and so there's great opportunity for all of us to know each other really, really well. And then our students have mentioned time and time again that one of their favorite things about the school is the way that they see the adults loving one another. So we're able, as they search to figure out ways to affiliate, to figure out how to be an authentic relationship and friendship with one another, we're able to provide that because the staff culture is imbued with that. We have a set of core values, and one of the statements in there is name and own all of my mistakes. I think as we're acknowledging our kids' search for authenticity, one of the ways that we can engage in that is to admit when we absolutely don't know, and to apologize when we're wrong. As you can tell, a lot of my staff is white, and I mentioned we're serving kids who are predominantly kids of color, and so there's an interplay there. And I think one thing that we do well is we ask more questions than we answer. So we just ask questions of our young people and of their experience, and then kind of sit with whatever they put back out there for us. Because my adults come into the building with the attitude that I choose to be here doing this with you, then our building has a vibe that we get to do this hard thing together. And so the long hours and the long days and the hard work feel like just what we're all called to do. As I look at this picture, I'm reminded that a couple of my youngest colleagues are members of Gen Z, so I think it's important for us to keep that in mind. They definitely bring a unique perspective to serving our young people, and as managers and colleagues of those companions, it brings an additional responsibility upon me to lean on their expertise in serving our young people. This is a broad generalization, but it's one that applies to many of the students at my school. My students, in general, go to public elementary schools where they are in classrooms with other kids that look like them. And then they come to Loyola Academy, and they sort of no longer fit in that former space. Because now they're in a private school. They're in a Jesuit school with a uniform and long hours and lots of commitments. And then they spend some years with us, and then they head off to our Catholic high schools in St. Louis, and for a length of time, they're working to figure out who they are in that space. And so we have the blessing to serve them in this truly liminal space. And I think in that time, they're searching for places to anchor their identity in. They're searching for God through affiliation with us and spaces that we're able to create in the school. So we do formal spiritual formation, but a lot of our programming is informally forming our students spiritually. Angela didn't call it flow, but we talk on staff about helping students achieve flow, that the thing that you experience perhaps when you're with good friends or reading a good book or playing a sport where you are completely unaware of the passage of time and whatever else is going on in the space, right? And so we believe that those sacred moments happen when our young people are experiencing flow, and if we can experience it with them, all the better. So what's pictured here is our school, Scola, and you can see Mr. G holding his own child who was with us that morning. And he's our social worker, but what he brought with him into that role, again, adults bringing their authentic interests, was a deep love for the way that music can impact the soul, the way that music can be therapeutic. And so he runs our school choir, but it is a therapy group for this group of young men that have decided to affiliate there. This is our volleyball team. They won a lot of games, but that's not really important. Although Jolene's in the room, and she would probably beg to differ. So the really cool thing here is that we didn't have anyone on this team who had any experience playing volleyball whatsoever. And so because we had 3 female staff members that are absolutely just courageous and fearless, say, I want to form a volleyball team, and this is what we're going to do there. This is how we're going to form kids, and this is how we're going to have those sacred moments together, doing something brand new, right? So what can we expose our kids to where they can search that's new? Volleyball is one of those things for this group of kids. And then the last one on this theme is my Dean of Students, Perry Johnson, who is a big kid at heart. Perry loves Hot Wheels. He's a grown ex-cop that loves Hot Wheels. And he's the best. So Perry brought all sorts of skills and knowledge to our school setting 4 years ago, but what he also brought was his massive Hot Wheels collection. And if you had told me 10 years ago that the middle school boys at Loyola Academy would be carrying around Matchbox cars and trading them, I would have giggled, but here we are. And the Hot Wheels Club is a thriving place for kids to be. So all these spaces are maybe non-traditional spaces for middle school boys, but they're spaces for them to seek identity, to affiliate, to experience those sacred moments with the adults and the kids in their school, and perhaps maybe to shake off any layers of that kind of toxic masculinity that may have come from other environments, or maybe that comes from our environment unknowingly. We are separated into 7 houses. This is my house, House Gonzaga, and the houses are mixed age and an opportunity for our older students to really take care of our younger students. When we ask our young people who their trusted adult in the building is, one of the first people that they name is their house leader. And this might be true in some of your schools. I know a lot of our schools have a house system. Again, we have the benefit of scale. You know, my house has 9 members and I have a co-leader, and so we really get to know each of these kids deeply and individually. I get to pair up Lamar and Kanye together and say, okay, the 2 of you are gonna work on this particular skill because you have it and you need it, right? So this is, as our kids are kind of searching for a place to belong, a little family within a bigger family has been really beneficial for us. So I mentioned that the adults have the chance to model for our kids authentic friendship, and I believe that this is something that they're searching for, right? They're searching for what does it look like to have authentic friendships with young people my age that aren't exclusively digital, that are face-to-face, where we can talk about matters of the heart. We take our kids to camp in Illinois every year. Loyola always has been a phone-free school, so we haven't had to encounter whether to peel that back or what that looks like over the last year, and we're really grateful for that. But camp is truly a screen-free space. So for 3 days, we take kids many of whom have not spent the night away from home or left St. Louis City, out into the country and really have that time in nature, right? So just a nod to the desire by this group of people to encounter God in nature. This is one of the ways that we provide that. The other way is on our field. We have recess 3 times a day because the school day is so long. And for years, we were managing recess sort of like always, right? You know, like you got it, right? That's like the, right? So, and I want to sit and talk about the merits of Jonathan Haidt's work. The 3 of us were discussing it. I would love to know everyone's opinion on that. But one of the pieces of his thesis that we didn't discuss earlier is the need to put real and unmanaged play back into the lives of youth. And I'm confident that we would agree that is a good thing for our young people. And so as we're spending some time away from the screens, we're also giving them opportunity to navigate conflict amongst themselves. A big push of ours on staff this last year was to take an additional breath or 2. So in the past, if you saw something on the field, right, and you're like, okay, it's time for me to intervene, what I asked my staff to do was take 1 or 2 more deep breaths. And what we find over and over and over is our kids solve it themselves. They solve it better than we would have, and now they have the skills to do it next time. And so we are still working on this, but infusing some risk taking and some real play back into our setting has been hugely beneficial for us. This is my last slide and maybe my favorite. This is Daryl on graduation day just a few weeks ago, and I don't tend to hug our students who are enrolled. We do high fives and we do fist bumps and maybe we do kind of side hugs. But they see that when alums come back, alums get really big bear hugs from me. And so on our graduation day this year, Daryl won our highest student award. And he took that moment, his first moment as an alum of the school, to give me the biggest hug I think I've ever received. And Daryl's headed off to St. Louis University High School, and he's going to add so much to that space, and that space is going to add so much to him. And I look forward to him coming back, and he'll always have a bear hug waiting for him at Loyola Academy. That's all I've got. And I'll pass the mic off to Jeff Leping.
All right, thank you, Ashley. My name is Jeff Leping. I've been an educator at St. Paul's High School in Winnipeg, Manitoba for 27 years, and also a basketball coach. So I kind of did mine as a bit of a coach's reflection on Dr. Patterson's words from this morning. So first off, I want to thank Dr. Patterson for her insightful keynote. Her words really resonated deeply with me, not just as an educator, but as somebody who has spent the past 27 years coaching basketball at St. Paul's High School. It's been a real privilege to be a part of my players' lives, and I think that part of my experience as an educator has just been such an important part of who I am as a person, but also as an administrator. I think I've taken on a role as VPS in the last 4 years, and I often find myself far more thinking about how to respond to my colleagues' needs more as a coach than necessarily as any other role. So I really do value my time as a coach at St. Paul's. First thing I wanted to talk about that really resonated with me with Dr. Patterson's words were the importance for youth of relationships. I wanted to sort of express just a couple things that we try to do at our school and in my program really that I think really helps to build those relationships. And I think team culture really depends on solid relationships, not only with teams, but also with our school community itself. So I have included a few pictures from events that we've had celebrating one another. But I want to talk first about something that we didn't do at basketball. The picture that I chose here is actually an initiative that our football team put on during homecoming. And the athletes will go around and visit somebody within the school that they felt had an impact on them in their high school career, and they will ask them to wear or hang up their uniform in their workspace for the day of the game, just to show that appreciation. And the key thing that our coach tells the athlete to do is express to that person what it is that they've done for them and what relationship they've developed with them. And it's just a really meaningful thing when that student comes into your office or into your classroom to share that experience with you. I will try to actually influence more, say, linemen, et cetera, so that I can actually put on and wear the jerseys. It seems like the receivers always want to come into my office to share their uniforms, and it's a bad look for me to walk around with the jersey on. Also, you may notice the picture on the website is very old. I am still that same person on the website. It was about probably 16 years ago the photo was taken. One of the other things that we try to do is we try to make sure our players are building relationships not only with themselves, with their coaches, but also with our wider alumni community. And as coaches, we really try to be as authentic as we can be with our students or with our players. We encourage our coaches to communicate with them about the good and the bad that their athletes are doing, particularly in a competitive environment. There's times where kids don't get the same opportunity as others, and we want to make sure that they understand the decisions sometimes that we make, and that authentic relationship is only developed through truth and really direct feedback to our athletes. Let's call it the photos on the left and the right. I often think this is, if you did search up my Instagram feed, pretty much my Instagram feed is just this night every year, because it is really my favorite night of the year. As we go into prepping for playoffs, I'll invite a bunch of our alumni back to the school to have a bit of a scrimmage with our team, and we sort of market it as this is an opportunity for you to really help this next generation try to reach the potential and dreams that they have, which is just a great experience for me. I like seeing the players. You'll see actually in a couple of pictures my own sons that have played for me. And then they're just a terrific night where our players get together with the past, and they are able to really connect with one another. And I'm always amazed, when I see players outside of this experience that are sometimes decades apart, who are close in their relationships. They are reaching out to one another. They're helping one another. And I think it often stems just from events like this that we try to do at the school. And so I think, to me, a lot of what Dr. Patterson said challenged me, but that was one that I really felt that this was something that we were doing a pretty good job of, is trying to make sure that we were building those relationships. Here's the second one that I sort of was looking at is connections, which you might say you're cheating. That's kind of the same thing, but I was going to look at this just slightly different. And I think the youth they're navigating the world in very different ways than I would have, than many would have. And of course, they are, as she mentioned, connected through their devices and connected through those things. And I think sometimes that the team environment allows them to connect in a more broad sense with one another, right? They share face-to-face connections. They share struggle. They reach for a collective purpose, which I think is an important part of what athletics do and what athletics can provide them when they come through. And it kind of doesn't fit quite well here, but I shoved it in because it's just something that struck me during her talk today, because we kind of met virtually with Dr. Patterson about 6 weeks ago, where I was developing a bunch of things, and then her talk was just great. So there's a few things today. So one of the things that popped into my head was the idea of sacred moments. And I don't want to sound blasphemous here, because I often refer during practices, during game, as kind of the basketball gods and their importance in our life and their importance within our team. And, when teams do the right things, when they share the ball, when we get multiple paint touches in a possession, where we are rotating and helping one another, we are successful. And I always try to point out the role of the basketball gods in that they're going to reward you. You're going to see success when you're doing the right things. Because I really want our players to find those sacred moments. I know she said you can't really contrive them, but if they feel that they have a role in that and they've actually produced something good and effective, they can start to see God in all things, which is really what we want. Right? So when that team comes together and they sacrifice for one another, when they celebrate each other's success, that's when they can begin to understand what it means to belong with a group, with one another. And in the Jesuit context, that sense of belonging is deeply spiritual, right? It's where they begin to see God in all things. Authenticity, I think, this was one that I often try to think about. How can I help my athletes be their authentic selves? How can I be my authentic self when I am around them? And to me, what kind of came into my head was the idea of being responsible myself and being authentic myself and being open and willing to share when I've made mistakes, right? Sometimes I might make the bad decision on a play call or the playing rotation, or perhaps I'm not quite modeling appropriate decorum with officials. When I can own up and explain myself or apologize for what I've done, it allows them to really sort of feel that it's okay for them to do the same thing, that it's okay for them to be a little more open and vulnerable. It's okay for them to make mistakes because they understand that I also make mistakes. So to me, that was the big part of authenticity. We have had a pretty successful basketball team. I really do like this picture here because it kind of shows you just the spirit of joy that happens. The big guy who's on the far right, he had a tendency for every picture to do a nipple pull, where he would pull his jersey aside, and you can kind of see half the team is really excited about us winning, and the other half is excited that they could stare over at his nipple. So I always thought this was a great example of sort of team camaraderie. In fact, number 2 in the middle is now a phys ed teacher on our staff. So again, showing you that sort of cycle. A couple great pictures there. The one in the upper left there is 2 of my actual sons, and then 1 sort of adopted son up there as well. So, and as I said, I think one of the thing listening to Dr. Patterson's message, I found myself really deeply challenged. Not in a discouraging way, but in a way that caused me to reflect and grow, right? After 27 years of coaching, it's easy often for me to think I know all the answers, I've experienced everything, but it caused me to really think about the fact that the kids that I deal with today are very different than the kids I dealt with 25 years ago. And so how can I be more intentional about meeting them where they are now, right? Am I truly listening to my players? Am I creating space for them to be their whole selves, not just their athletic selves? Have I been able to build that into our team culture, and how can I better do that? And how can I better respond to those challenges and new challenges that might come? And hopefully not for too many more years, because I would like to retire at some point. But they really challenged me to think beyond the scoreboard, beyond the stat sheet, and into, again, the idea of magis, right? That how can we seek to do more for the greater glory of God? And that's really the essence of what we try to do as Jesuit educators. I think I don't have another slide. Yes, I don't. Good. All right. So I'd like to, again, thanks to Dr. Patterson for reminding me that the youth really aren't just a part of the future, but they are also our current present. And the only real way for them to move into that future is for us to really try to connect with them where they are now. So I'm just going to finish by saying that I'm going to try to keep listening to them. I'm going to definitely try to keep showing up for them. Side note, I often tell my son who wants to get an education, I always say, like, I'll give you the honest truth. Almost 95% of my success as a teacher, as an educator, as a coach is simply just showing up, right? If people think that, you're going to be somewhere and you're actually there, that really helps build those relationships. So, and I'm certainly going to keep believing in the incredible potential of our young people. So thank you very much, and I will pass it on over to Mike.
I started this talk off great because I grabbed somebody else's notebook where I'd written all my notes. So we'll see how this goes. My name is Mike Lovinguth. I work at Arrupe Jesuit High School. I was too busy to put a name slide up, so we get to start with my first picture. But I've been at Arrupe for 12 years. I started there as an alumni service corps way back in 2004. Took a break and did grad school and did some other work and came back in 2018. I think I'm contractually obligated to say I'm also an alumni of St. Louis University High School. And so you've got a very St. Louis heavy contingent up here. And then Jeff's Jets beat my beloved Blues, so he's inducted into the St. Louis family on the stage today. Arrupe is a Cristo Rey model school. For those of you who don't know, we primarily serve underserved populations. And much like Ashley's school, ours is one of kind of a mostly mono culture in terms of almost 90% of our families have Mexican heritage or Mexican tradition in their family. Most of them first-generation college attendees when they graduate from Arrupe. And so, we often joke about how, and so that's kind of leading to my first thing with connection with culture with our families. We often joke about in Denver how Arrupe is Denver's best kept secret and how that's kind of our biggest failing. And we're trying to hopefully get that word out there about us. And so hopefully you'll join me today and help us a little bit with that. So my goal today is to deliver kind of an imperfect glimpse into our students' lives, but it's something that I think is hopefully inspires you and showcases some different forms of belonging. And we're still young, we're still learning, we're still making mistakes, and so hopefully you give me that little bit of grace. So one of the things I think we've had the most success with belonging at our school is listening to our families. We have a group called Familias Unidas, our families together. They meet monthly. Sometimes it's 30 families, sometimes it's one. But they meet with 2 members of our Spanish department, and they do a great job, Stephanie and so that do a great job of providing some programming that either lets them into secrets of the school, so how corporate work study might work, or how the college process might work, or sometimes they talk about difficult issues like vaping or bullying. But one of the things that they love to do is celebrate with food and celebrate with culture. And so this is an image from the Spanish department's Dia de los Muertos celebration, which is one of the favorite nights across the year. This has really grown out. And the students make the little ofrecitas in the background, but this is a family member who came dressed up, and they do face painting for the kids, and it's a really good time to, it's also a great promotion for the middle schoolers who need to come to Arrupe. So some other cultural connections we try to make. Las Posadas is a celebration in December around Holy Week or before Christmas. And I was student government moderator when I first came back to Arrupe, along with athletic and activities director. And one of my students, a senior, Valerie, she said to me, how come we don't do a Las Posadas here? And I was like, what is that? Can you tell me? And it's pretty simple. It's a reenactment of the Christmas story that takes place out in front of our school. We march down the street with candles, and it's just a wonderful way to celebrate both our faith and our community. It's grown into a big thing where we can't fit everybody anymore, and so it's really stressful, but it's so worth doing every year. This year we had 2 seniors. We don't have a music program. We often only have 6 periods in the day, so the kids' college prep curriculum pretty much takes up all of their school time, and so. But the guitarists around the school find places to play, and the 2 seniors played guitar. We really try to make it light hors d'oeuvres, and then try to shoo them out of the school building because it's a Friday night and everyone wants to go home. But the guitars played for for an hour, and so we ended up there till 8:30 or 9, and everybody was very excited to be there because it was so much fun watching the seniors play. This is an image from Las Posadas, and so you can see the school in the background. Half of it is no longer there right now, so that's been really fun this year, but we're going to build another half of it where the old half was. But we kind of start way far in the distance where you see the car lights where the church is, and we stop at the houses along the way where we've strategically planted staff members to participate in saying no to Mary and Joseph as they walk down the street. You can't stay here. And then we finally let them into the school, which is really nice. A couple of the other things we do to connect with our family's heritage is Feast of the Virgin de Guadalupe. We just started a Seal of Biliteracy program, which awards a bilingual certificate to all of our students when they graduate if they have met the state standards. And then we recently started a Families Gala. I know most of you have big Families Gala. We call it the Casbah at SLU. Our gala is more the business community of Denver. We don't really have a whole lot of giving from our alumni yet. We don't really have a whole lot of giving from our families are not able to give. But the business community and our partners in Denver give tremendously. But this year we started so that our families could feel a part of that Viva Arrupe. And so we have one night, Noche Vaquera, so we all dressed up as cowboys, which was great. And we got together and sung and danced and had food. And so those are some of the ways that we connect with the culture of our families. The second topic I hit on when thinking of Dr. Patterson's research is our clubs. I've been fortunate to be a part of a number of clubs, student government, as I said, newspaper, and I'm now looking forward to the challenge of a new schedule next year, which will allow us to have a club period nearly every day after second period. What I hit on was a couple of clubs that have a purpose and seem to tie in. They're some of our most successful clubs, and they seem to tie in with the fact that our families are looking for opportunity in this world. Our mock trial is one of our most successful clubs. The moderators will tell you it's because they provide dinner every Monday night to the kids. But I think it's actually something more like this, right? You get to go to a real-life courtroom. You get to act out a trial. Usually they use the names from some popular sitcom, so I think these guys are doing, this is Jerry from Parks and Rec, and I think this is Amy Poehler's character interviewing him. So there's some fun acting involved in that. And so mock trial is a place where I think many of our students find belonging. There's a couple other clubs that the kids find belonging that connect with careers. We have an entrepreneurship club that the kids also earn credit with Regis University, Business 101 credit, and they develop a business and they pitch it in front of a crowd like this one night in the spring, and they compete against college kids doing the same thing, so that's really fun. And then our robotics club, I was just talking with someone from Christopher Ray Milwaukee this morning about their innovation lab, and we're part of that construction project is building the kids a maker space, and so that the robotics team will have a proper space to compete and build. And then one that's not so connected, or not yet, I guess, with career is our esports club, which I'm sure many of you have. I talked to the moderator, and he really loves this picture. Our students are Vincent in the pink hat and Ulysses in the blue hoodie, but these are all team kids from other schools, and they just sat down and started playing Smash Brothers after the state tournament together, and he really connected with this photo when I talked to him about it. And one particular student, Rafael, his family is not Mexican. They actually came from Russia. And so he has had some challenges finding belonging in our school. But when he joined esports and when he joined mock trial, because he's in both of their moderators talked about how he was able to find some space there. And not only space to do friendship type things, but he began sharing his faith. I think this was a mock trial. Brian's here, so he can correct me if I'm wrong. But he's Orthodox Christian, and so many of our students don't have a whole lot of exposure to that, but they were able to ask him, and he was able to tell them about Orthodox Christianity and then ask them about the Catholic faith. And so I thought that was a really neat connection with what we've been talking about already today. And so a great opportunity for kids who find belonging to then open up about their faith. And then finally, I wanted to hit on opportunities for faith to do justice. I had the blessing. I had never been to IFTJ before. I didn't quite know what to expect, and my community service director said, "None of you admin ever go on trips with us, so please come with me." And so I came. And we brought along 4 young women who did an amazing job. They didn't know what they were getting to either, but Regis Jesuit High School in Denver allowed us to mix with their groups and present to senators on the Hill in D.C. So this is Regis Jesuit and Arrupe partnering together in that vein. One of the great things that came out of that was in the spring, Ms. Moncada, who's in the front here, she put together a mini IFTJ at Regis University with Regis Jesuit, where first-gen students came together to talk about care for our common home. And so that was a really blessed partnership with that high school and with Regis University. And it all came out of kind of this notion that connecting faith and justice is something that our kids really want to do. And so we're going to take 8 more kids back this year, and I'm really looking forward to that. The other thing we do is that Ms. Moncada has kind of highlighted is a group called Christ in the City that serves food to the homeless, but that doesn't just serve food, but has lunch with them and conversation with homeless or on-house people in Denver. And she takes a group of students every Wednesday. We had a student named Ethan, or we have a student named Ethan, and he was struggling in school. He had some significant family challenges, and he had disengaged almost entirely. He was on disciplinary contract, and our dean is great, and one of the things he suggested was, have you done any community service? That's an easy way to plug in and feel like you're giving back. And so Ethan started going to Christ in the City lunches on Wednesday, and he's been to 5 or 6 of them, and he really loves it. And I saw the connection with IFTJ, and I invited him to apply to IFTJ. He's not normally a student who we would reward or accept for some of these more things where we need a little bit more responsibility out of our students, but he was so excited the moment I suggested it to him, and he applied, and we accepted him, and so I'm really looking forward to what he has to say about his experience with our unhoused people and the homeless in Denver. And then we're really beginning our community, we're 22 years old, but we're really beginning our community service journey. We have options for all of our students in every year to do a day of service with their classmates. And we now have a junior service project, as many of you may have. We have a week-long experience for them, which is improvement. I think the kids really have been responding to community service, and they're asking for more of it. And then the last piece is that we've recently started a youth group. And when I talked to the youth group advisors, one of the interesting things that I heard them come back to me was the children that are coming, the students that are coming to youth group are not coming there because they are super involved in their church or they are super involved in some sort of youth group outside. It's because they don't have that opportunity outside of the school, and they want to join that community, and Arrupe has provided that for them. And so I thought that was a really key insight that our theology teacher, noticed and offered their opportunity for them to engage. Lastly, I took the kids on a kind of a last-minute Stuco trip to the mountains in Colorado Mesa, and Chassa gave me some advice that I hadn't heard before, and maybe you've heard it before, but when a kid comes to school, we usually give them a T-shirt, that says Arrupe and class of whatever, and that T-shirt tells them where they go to school, but the second T-shirt that a kid gets tells them where they belong. And so if you think about that in your own context, what is that T-shirt that we are providing to kids? Is it a sports T-shirt? Is it a club T-shirt? And what about those kids who aren't getting that second T-shirt? And how do we get them involved? And I thought that was really, since we're all gear people, I thought that was really important. So thank you very much.